Aimee's a graduate student who survived a near-fatal case of necrotizing fasciitis in 2012 after falling from a zip line. Against all odds and medical knowledge, Aimee lived through infection. She coded twice during the process and lost her leg, left leg, right foot, and both hands. Despite everything she's been through, she continues to live life to the fullest and uses her story to inspire others despite her struggles. She hopes to share how she made it through her tragic experience and what she's learned along the way. So we're glad to have you.
Thank you. I must say I use that bio every time I speak, and you're the first person who's ever known how to pronounce necrotizing fasciitis.
Flesh-eating disease. Every channel will say something different. You're like.
Well, thank you, George O.T., so much for having me here today. It's an honor to get to speak with you. Some of you might remember me from May of 2012 when the flesh-eating bacteria, as we'll call it, ravaged my body. Some of you might remember how the community just banded together to support me, how faith led to my survival despite all the odds. But for some of you who might not, I'll start at the beginning. It was May 1st of 2012, and I was a graduate student in psychology at the University of West Georgia. I was also working 3 jobs. I was a grad assistant, I bartended at the Longhorn Steakhouse, and I was also a waitress at the Sunnyside Cafe, which is a little breakfast restaurant. And I had actually just gotten off my shift at Sunnyside Cafe when one of my girlfriends, she was also a waitress there, called me to see if I would want to come hang out at the little river that ran behind her house. And it was a beautiful spring day, nice and warm, but had that good breeze, so I couldn't say no. And as we're wading through this river in her backyard, we stumble upon this old homemade zip line. Now, if you watch the news, they were showing like that I was on some Costa Rican jungle zip line. That's how it was. This was like a homemade zip line across a creek that you could jump over, maybe 5 feet above the rocks below. And we all went on it one time. It had like little handlebars. It was kind of like a dog runner with handlebars. So yeah, you can imagine. But you know, I'm from the South. If we go on a river and we see a rope swing, we don't ask questions. We just do it. And that's how it's always been. So we didn't ask questions. We each went on it one time. It was actually my second go on the zip line when I heard just 2 of the worst sounds I've ever heard in my life. And the first one was the sound of the line snapping. And the second was the sound of my body hitting the rocks that lay below. And I looked down at my leg, and it was a big gash. It was the worst I'd ever been cut in my entire life. And it was a curved gash, so it like had that flat thing going on where my body was just kind of falling out. And so my friends went and got help, and I was sent to the ER, and they knew my left leg was cut really bad, but it actually took 72 hours before they realized that I had necrotizing fasciitis and was just harboring this really deadly bacteria. And by the time they did realize that, I mean, I'd already lost control of bowel and bladder. I was to the point where I could no longer form coherent sentences. All I could do was babble that I think I'm dying. And as soon as I got to the emergency room, they knew exactly what it was. My tongue was shriveled up like a lizard, and my entire left leg was dark purple, and that was the rotting. And as soon as they saw me, they knew what happened, and they said that left leg is gonna have to go. So I was life flighted to Doctors Hospital in Augusta, where my leg was amputated at the hip. A large part of my skin also had to be removed, up to about here on my torso. So they had to take skin grafting from my right thigh to cover everything that's remaining here. It's kind of like with fighting necrotizing fasciitis, it's kind of like a forest fire. So you go a little bit beyond where it's been eaten to make sure that nothing happens further. So that's why they actually went up a little bit. And then I was also on vasopressors to just keep my vital organs going because I coded as soon as they moved me from the stretcher to my bed. And I actually coded twice and had to be resuscitated. And so during that time, I was on vasopressors to keep my circulation and my blood pressure up. And unfortunately, that caused all the veins and capillaries in both of my hands and my right foot to be amputated as well. And I do remember the moment that, you know, my dad held up my hands for me to look at, and they were just dark purple painful and necrotizing, and he just said, you know, we're gonna have to get rid of these. They're not healthy. And all I could do was just mouth, let's do this. At that time, of course, I was unaware that any of this was going on. That first night when I was laying in a hospital bed, the doctors told my parents, you're probably not gonna make it. She has like a 99% chance of not making it through the night. And my parents asked them what they could do. And the doctor said, well, the only thing you can do at this point is pray. And my parents did that. And my parents prayed. And actually my psychology department held an all-night prayer vigil in my honor. And that evening, as my organs were working so hard to keep me alive, my lactic acid levels were just skyrocketing. If you guys know anything about lactic acid, your muscles produce it, like when you're working them. And that night, my lactic acid levels rose to 3 times the survivable level, and the doctors just said there's no reason for her to be alive right now. It was 10 times the normal lactic acid level. So I don't know about y'all, but I kind of think the prayers might have worked. To give you guys some of the words that the doctors used to describe my recovery: astonishing, mind-boggling, incredible, and unbelievable. So those are doctors speaking. And I think we all know what saved me. But during that time, like I said, I was unaware that any of this was happening. I was pretty much in a drug-induced stupor during that period of my life. And I didn't know what was going on, but you know, I didn't expect to spend 2012 in a hospital, but I responded the only way that I knew how, and that was to fight for life. I'd always fought, and I continued just to fight for life. And to me, it's that determination, it's that will to be that really saved me the most. It's the fact that I'm stubborn, and I think that stubbornness, that spark, is what has really allowed me to do so well. And so from this journey, from there to where I am now, I've learned several important things, so I'll just share a few of the main points with you guys now. And the first one has been especially important to my recovery and has really helped me in a lot of different ways, and that is the lesson of compassion. The lesson that compassion leads to healing. And I think a lot of us learn that. I don't know, some of you guys might be involved in like service organizations. I don't know what GOTA does for the community, but I think you learn that throughout life as you serve the community and serve other people. This happened to me quite on accident. I was actually in Shepherd Spinal Center for my inpatient rehabilitation. And a lot of people said, well, why were you at Shepherd? You don't have a spinal cord injury. In retrospect, I'm so glad that's where I was, because if I had been at a hospital for amputees, I would have been the worst off there. You know, all these people missing one limb below the knee. In the amputee community, we call that a paper cut. It would have been really easy to feel sorry about myself. But when I was at Shepherd, on either side of me were people with C3, C4 spinal cord injuries who couldn't move any part of their body except for their face and blew through a straw to propel their wheelchairs. So it was really, really hard for me to feel sorry for myself. I still did quite a bit, especially in the beginning once the drugs were, you know, weaning off. There was a time where I had a very emotional period, and I remember sitting in the therapy gym with my physical therapist and looking at this girl's beautiful hands. She had a spinal cord injury, and just lamenting about the loss of my own. And my therapist says, yeah, you might not have hands, but you're the only one in this room who can control when they go to the bathroom. And that really put things in perspective for me. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So that kind of taught me to count your blessings, because suffering is relative. And there is always further down. If you're alive, there is always a way that you could be worse. And I started noticing this when I got out of the hospital. I was helped by an agency called FODAC. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. They're located in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and they're a medical reuse facility. I like to say they're like the Goodwill of wheelchairs. So they take them, they refurbish them, and they give them out. And they actually helped me get a wheelchair, and I realized how awesome this facility was. So I started serving them as well. And in my service to them, I began to see all the little wheelchairs, the very small wheelchairs for kids that are, you know, just at the age where they should be learning to walk. And I had a completely normal childhood, and I never thought about the kids who couldn't go to the skating rink, or the kids who couldn't go to the birthday party, or the kids who sat lined up at recess. So being able to see and help these kids just makes me realize what I really have. It makes you realize that, you know, sometimes we take the little petty things in our lives for granted and we don't fully appreciate every moment like we could. And so to me, giving back has kind of brought that out of me and has kind of reminded me what all I have to be grateful for. And I've just seen so much love from working for Tools for Life, from serving on the advisory council for them. I have met so many amazing people and just seen how much the compassion and how much helping people and how much love there is, which makes me think, you know, love really is all you need. I think they had it right in the 60s. Through my experiences, if you just give that and that's all that you give, it can mean so much to a person. I was talking to Andrea at the break, and she and I both know a little boy who his family they're refugees from the Republic of Central Africa, and he has cerebral palsy. And being around him, I mean, I go and help hang out with him, and he's learned to use the iPad and operate it with his feet. He's 9 years old, he's doing these awesome learning games and stuff. But just seeing everything that he can do, I think that he's helped me more than I've helped him since I've been there, just from giving me that lesson on what people are capable of and what when somebody really loves you. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget it. He's almost completely nonverbal. He does, you know, vocalize, but it's very difficult to understand. And I was sitting with him one day, and just as clear as you or I would, he just turned to me and said, "I love you."
Oh, wow.
And that was like one of the most special moments for me, was to hear that. I really think that love makes all the difference. So compassion has been extremely important. The second thing that's a little bit more on a practical level is, I talked about this a little bit with the students earlier, where there's a will, there's a way. You've all heard that before, right? It's true. Persistence is like the number one thing I've just determined to be a huge protective factor in going through challenges. Because if you want something really bad, I don't care who you are, what abilities or disabilities or whatever you have, if there's something that you want and you want it badly enough, you'll do whatever it takes to get there, no matter what your goal is. So for me, this I discovered like right upon leaving Shepherd Center. So at Shepherd Center, I had nurses, I had a call button. It was really, really nice, you know, really easy living the easy life. Then I get sent home, and both my parents worked, and I was just alone. And this, you know, there was a first day when I was alone, and maybe an attendant, I think, maybe came in the morning to help me shower. But then she left, and I needed to do things. You know, something falls on the floor, I've got to figure out how to pick it up. I didn't have any prostheses at this point, and I started to learn to be very creative, because we have that creative genius to our human minds, which allows us, if you want something badly enough, you can figure out a way to get it. So I started to learn to think outside the box. To, you know, if I lean my head against the wall, when I lean over to pick this up, I won't fall out of my chair this time. And a lot of times that's how you have to learn these things. You have to fall out in order to learn, oh, I need that counterbalance so I don't fall out of the chair next time. So I find that, you know, if you want something badly enough, you'll find a way to get it, no matter who says you can't. I talked to the students about this earlier, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important. I have had a lot of people throughout this journey tell me that I can't do something, and I actually love it when that happens because I'm really stubborn and it's like a game to me, and then I'm like, oh, watch me. And it's fun because then I get to show them later how I could do it and, you know, make them take it back and all that good stuff. So I had one experience with an occupational therapist, and as I told the students before, he was bald, which is probably why when I asked him to help me learn how to do a ponytail, he just said, well, all the bilateral upper arm amputee women I know cut their hair short. And I love my long hair, and to me that was not an answer. At the moment I didn't know what to do, so I did cut my hair short, but I vowed at that moment that I would show him. And that over the next year I would learn how to put my hair in a ponytail. And I did just that. And I failed many times. There were many times I tried to get that ponytail and I just couldn't get it. And it slipped out of my arms, and I ordered all sorts of different ponytail holders off the internet for all sorts of different people. And the one that ended up working, it's one for people with one arm is who it's designed for. It's called the One Up. It it's actually amazing if you ever work with women who have decreased use of their arms. It's called the One Up, and it's this really neat device, and I worked with it for months and months and months, and I couldn't get it to work for me, and I kept trying. And if I hadn't kept trying, then one day when I was working with it, I would not have had that voice in my head that said, tie a loop in the end of it. And as soon as I tied a loop in the end of it, I got my hair up in a ponytail the very first try. So sometimes what I've noticed is you just have to keep trying something and keep failing at something. And sometimes it might seem like the answer is never going to come, and you might not even really have a plan. But if you just keep doing it over and over again, something's bound to happen. And I've learned that to be true time and time again. There was another time when I was visiting a healthcare professional, and they told me I would never be able to walk without the use of 2 forearm crutches. And about 6 months after they told me that, I dropped down to 1 forearm crutch. And about 6 months ago, as I was walking, I lifted up that 1 forearm crutch and took about 12 steps. So he said, you know, I've seen this before. I know what you're going to be able to do. And I say, well, you haven't seen me before. You might have seen this, but you haven't seen me. So a few other things that I'm working on right now are, I just started whitewater kayaking. It's one of my favorite things to do before I was injured. And it doesn't take legs, which is really cool. So I've managed to adapt to hold a paddle, and I've been doing class 2 and 3 whitewater kayaking, as well as I just learned to wakeboard, which is really crazy because my parents have lived on, or have had a lake house. We're like one in our extended family. And I tried wakeboarding and skiing my entire life and was never able to do it when I had legs. And now that I don't have legs, I can get up on the wakeboard and I'm just holding the bar in between my elbow. And so it's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. It's a big adrenaline rush. So I'm also currently in the process of getting an adaptive tricycle made. I'm moving out of my folks' house, which is a big change, but you know, I'm 27. They did build me a really great addition on the house. It's like totally accessible, and it would be just perfect if it wasn't attached to my parents' house. So I'm moving out on my own to Atlanta, and I'm actually one of the places that I'm looking at moving into is right on the Atlanta Beltline, which connects a lot of different parts of Atlanta. So I'm super excited about getting my tricycle out there and biking all over Atlanta, and that's going to be so much fun. And I think a lot of these things that I've tried so hard and I've persisted in doing are the things that bring me the most purpose in life, the things that I'm so passionate about. And so I think that those things that you want badly enough that will impact you, you'll try and do anything it takes to get there. And I tell people, you know, if you can't do something, you probably don't want it badly enough. You know, and of course there are situations where that might not hold true. And that being said, I still haven't figured out how to do the laundry yet. But just saying. And I can do the laundry, but I usually choose not to. So yes, where there's a will, there's a way has been very important for me. The next lesson was especially difficult for me as a woman who grew up being told you're very pretty all the time, and you know, being positively reinforced for being attractive, and then you wake up one day and a third of your body is gone, and you think, well, where does that leave me? And am I valuable to the world anymore? Especially in a society where we're bombarded with messages that you have to be starving and beautiful and perfect in order to be happy. And this was very difficult for me at first because I looked completely different. I remember I was able to get a pass from Shepherd Center to actually leave the center. And I was at my friend's house using the bathroom, and of course they were helping me. And behind the shower curtain was a mirror. The shower curtain was closed and I was sitting on the toilet. And she opened up the shower curtain jokingly, like, look at yourself. But guess what? They don't have a whole lot of mirrors at Shepherd Center. And maybe nobody had really shown me one yet for certain reasons. I had all this skin grafting done, and I saw myself in the mirror and just thought, who is that? I don't even recognize myself. I mean, it was incredibly disturbing. And I think that I had a nurse at Doctor's Hospital in Augusta who recognized that I was going to struggle with this because she had a lot of conversations with me about looking deeper and about my spirit and about what I really was. And this made me realize that we are so much more than this external shell that carries us around. We extend far beyond it. My spirit is far brighter than whatever this body may try to keep me in. And one day I will be perfect again once I shed this outer layer. And so for me, this experience has caused me to look deeper and caused me to appreciate myself and question, what is a self anyway? Am I this body? Was I ever this body? Am I different now because my body has changed? Or am I really exactly the same spirit that I always have been? And I think that nurse really realized that this was going to happen, and I'm so grateful for her. Not just for all those talks, but because when I discharged from Doctor's Hospital, she handmade me this rag doll. I know, she's a nurse. Like, you're working 12-hour shifts, and then you go home after your 12-hour shift, and you start making a rag doll for your patient? I mean, this lady was clearly a saint. So yeah, she made me this rag doll and gave it to me as soon as I left. But what was ultimately so special to me about this doll, which I named Jackie, the nurse was Jacqueline, so I named her after her. What was so special to her is actually, about her to me, is actually what's written on the back of her head. This is what Jacqueline wrote on the back of her head. It says, Aimee, please remember, no body is perfect. This doll is handmade with imperfections because we all are made different. It's what we do with what we have that really counts. Love, Jackie. And I don't know about you guys, but I think that every little girl, and maybe every big girl too, needs one of these dolls to be reminded of that. We forget that. It's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have that really counts. And I've started seeing that in another wording as well, that we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to what happens to us. I can't control that I lost my limbs, but I can choose how I react to the situation. But you know, what gets a lot of people isn't that response. They're fine. You know, we can make lemonade out of lemons, but sometimes it's really hard. The lemons are too sour. We can't take the lemons. So what about the stuff that we can't control? And for me, that's been a very important lesson as well, because for me, that's where faith comes in. But to me, that's the only way you can spin it. You know, you just have to believe that there's a reason that everything is happening right now. You have to believe it in the very depths of yourself. Because these are the moments, these are the tests, the poking and prodding to say, are you really joyous? Do you really believe? Or are things just good right now, so it's convenient and it's okay? So when things get bad, that's the real test of what you believe. In those dark nights of the soul, which I've had several, I've had many, you know, I'm definitely, my outside is shining and is bright, but we've all had those dark moments. And I certainly don't get on stage and talk about all, you know, poor me, or listen to this time that this awful thing happened to me, but there have been those times, and there have been those moments where I was on the floor in the hotel bathroom because I slipped off the shower bench and my arm was all twisted in the grab bar, and I just screamed and cried. Because in those moments, those emotions have to be expressed. If you hold them in, they're going to come out at the wrong time on the wrong person that you really love. And I've had that happen too. But during those moments, I've always just had to let it out. But then after you let it out, you have a choice. You can stay there forever. You can stay in that dark pit forever. Or you can look for the light. And you can find the light. You can remember that the sun always comes up tomorrow. And that things change. There's always another opportunity. And even in those most difficult moments, I have to remember that the universe is unfolding exactly as it should. This is all happening. This whole grand scheme, everything in my life has been preparing me for this moment. Everything in my life has been leading up to this moment, and there's a plan for it all. It gets frustrating sometimes because I only have like one little puzzle piece, and there's no way I can expect to understand how it fits into the entire huge puzzle. And I really don't think there's a true way for any of us to know why are any of us sitting in this room right now? There's no way to know. And trying to figure all of that out, to me, is like trying to teach a turtle calculus. You just can't do it. It's not for us to know. Because the plan has already been written, and only God knows how it's going to work out. And so for me, my role is just to fully experience the unfolding of life and whatever it brings, and to life might not work out how I planned it, but it worked out as it should. And I also truly believe that these challenges in our lives happen because if they didn't, how would we ever grow? How would we ever get stronger? I mean, you have to meet challenges in order to adapt, in order to learn these things. My entire life, I prayed for wisdom. You know, I studied transpersonal and humanistic psychology. I wanted to understand, how do people work? How does the universe work? Why is everything the way it is? And I never thought I would learn it like this, but this has brought me so many incredible understandings that I've yearned for. So I just think about what a different person I would be if I had never gone through this and what all I've learned. So I think it's just really important to take our challenges, to take the things that happen to us not as, oh, poor me, another obstacle, but as a learning experience. Life is just a series of obstacles to be figured out. And for me, whenever I have obstacles, I see it as like a video game. And these are all the things I have to overcome to get to the next level of the video game. And then things are going to constantly go wrong there too. I'm going to have to jump over all these pits of fire, and there's going to be bad guys coming at me, and I've got to get through all those obstacles to get to the final level. And so for me, that's a really good metaphor that helps me out. But you know, sometimes we do go around the world thinking this is good and this is bad. And so I want the good stuff, but the bad stuff, no thanks. Like, I don't want those lessons. They're not comfortable. Just give me the good stuff. And what I found is you don't always really know what's good and bad. Like, sometimes we don't have the best judgment when it comes to knowing what's good and bad. People come to me on the streets, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, like this terrible thing has happened to you. And I'm like, I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, because so much has happened to me as a result, I mean, if I wasn't in this situation, my life would not be as it is now. And I'm so joyous and I'm so happy for how my life is that I'll take whatever it took to get here. And this actually reminds me of a parable that I heard once that I found extremely applicable in my life, especially when it comes to suspending judgment, which I think is so important. And this is I'll read you guys this parable. I just love it so much. I think it's really says a lot. It's the parable of the farmer, and it's called Maybe, although I've also seen it out there as being called We'll See. So it's about this farmer. And one day the farmer's horse runs away. And all of his nosy neighbors come over. Oh, your horse ran away? We're so sorry. That's just such terrible luck. And the farmer just looks at them and says, maybe. And then the next day the horse comes back and it brings with it 3 wild horses. And the neighbors are back again. Oh, what good luck, all these wild horses. And the farmer just says, maybe. And the following afternoon, the farmer's son goes to try to tame one of the wild horses. And when doing so, he falls off and he breaks his leg. And there are the neighbors again, in usual fashion. Oh, we're so sorry. What terrible luck for you to undergo. The farmer just says, maybe. Well, the following day, the troops come in town and are recruiting all the able-bodied young men to go fight in the war for the nation. And the son does not have to go because he's been injured. And he's able to stay at the farm and take care of his father. And the neighbors are there again. Oh, it's such good luck that your son can stay here so you can save the farm. But the farmer just looks at them and once again says, maybe. And to me, that just goes to show that whatever happens to you in life, you don't know whether it's going to be good or bad in the long run because you can't see that far. It's all about perspective. And I think that having that perspective, so, you know, when somebody steals the car out from front of your house, you know, and everybody's like, oh, that's such horrible bad luck, we're so sorry, you know, you can just say, maybe, and wait to see what happens. That did happen to me recently. I don't know if you guys heard, but like 2 weeks ago, my van got stolen from the front of my house. It was just insane. One of my friends came over. I'm in the process of transitioning from Snellville to Atlanta, and the house that I'm moving into by the Beltline, maybe not the best area, you know, it's transitioning, so, yeah, the whole fourth ward, exactly. And so my friend comes over on Sunday, it's about 5 o'clock. I haven't really been outside all day because I'm getting my master's degree. You hardly get to see sunlight. The only light I see is the backlight on my iPad when I'm writing papers. And so, I hadn't been outside all day, and I knew my car was there the previous night. My friend comes over and says, honey, where's your van? And at that moment, like I said, I love cooking. I was actually making a chicken pot pie on the stove. And And immediately when he said, "Where's your van?" I knew it must have been stolen. I heard people talking about their cars getting stolen in that area. But I was making this chicken pot pie. And I was making this chicken pot pie from scratch. And when you make chicken pot pie from scratch, first you like saute up all your veggies with some butter, and then you add flour, and this makes what's called a roux. And then after you make the roux, you add your chicken broth, your half and half, your liquid, but that's what turns into that like really delicious gravy that's in a chicken pot pie. And if you know anything about making a roux or making gravies, you know that during that time period you can't stop stirring or the whole thing gets ruined. So my friend comes in like, "Where's your car?" I'm like, "Oh, my car was stolen." My car was, but I just kept stirring because I mean, if I knew one thing, it was that chicken pot pie was gonna turn out good. So my boyfriend's there calling 911, holding it up to my ear on speakerphone. I'm just stirring. And the chicken pot pie was delicious. And that was one good thing about that night. But the good thing is, I trusted every minute of the way. My boyfriend was like, "It is freaking me out how calm you are right now and how dedicated you are to this chicken pot pie." And what I said to him was, a lot of things have gone wrong in my life up to this point, and so far it's worked out pretty well. And there's a lot of people out there that are in my situation that don't have a van to get stolen. And I'm lucky that I even have one to get stolen. And there's lots of people out there that have to deal with this every day. We don't know how long I'm going to have to deal with this, but immediately after that chicken pot pie was cooked and eaten, I went on my second set of the plan, which was, well, let's figure things out. How am I going to get to Shepherd Center tomorrow? I have a meeting at 7:30 in the morning. Luckily, I was in Atlanta already, so I didn't have to deal with coming from Snellville. But I immediately went onto the MARTA website, started mapping out the MARTA routes, found it would take me 2 buses and a train to get to Shepherd Center in the morning. I've never really taken MARTA in a wheelchair, so I really was not very comfortable with like leaving it up in the air. I didn't know it could take an hour plus, and I didn't know how much time to allot myself. So I mapped out how far Shepherd Center is from the house that I'm moving into, and it was 5 miles. And my wheelchair can go 5 miles per hour. So I thought, well, MARTA's unpredictable, but I know if I just take the sidewalk all the way there, it'll probably take me about an hour. And so I did. And it was really interesting seeing the Atlanta community at 6 o'clock in the morning. The runners, the people who were getting up for work, the people that were still up from the night before. It was a whole mix of different people. North Avenue was pretty rough, just the sidewalks are not very good. But once I got on Peachtree, it was smooth sailing all the way down to Shepherd Center, and I made it 5 minutes before my 7:30 meeting started. Luckily, my vehicle was then found during the day. It was located. The thieves didn't take anything out of it, not even this $6,000 titanium wheelchair that was in the trunk. I mean, my car has an excellent speaker system. They didn't take any of my speakers. What they did take was my iPhone charger, some mixed CDs that my boyfriend had made me, and a book from work about spinal cord injuries. So at least they're getting an education. The really bizarre thing is what they left in my car, which was like their toothbrushes and deodorant and makeup and like stuff with DNA all over it. The ABV is just having a ball in right now. So it was just a really bizarre situation, but I thought it would work out, and it all did in the end. So I was really glad that I didn't freak out at that moment, and that I was cool, calm, and collected, and that all of my items were recovered. So that was awesome. So suspending judgment. Sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you just have to say, we'll see, maybe. But the final lesson that I'll talk to you guys about is kind of what this has taught me about my own future. And that has been about advocacy. It's been about my calling and my purpose. I always knew I was interested in like wilderness therapy, ecotherapy, utilizing nature as a healing modality, but I never knew who I wanted to work with. Like, do I want to work with troubled teens, alcoholics? I didn't really know. I didn't really care. And this situation made me realize the population I was called to work with, which is people who have undergone traumatic injuries and illnesses. And so this has given me kind of that platform to stand on. I've always had a very loud voice, as you can tell. I've always been very high energy, and so this has basically just given me a way to funnel, a place to funnel in wheelchairs, when they get to be my age, they have all of the opportunities that they deserve to have in order to live a fulfilling life. In order to make sure that we have curb cuts and that we have accessible transportation, in order to make sure that everybody is living a fulfilling and successful life. And as I woke up in that hospital bed and realized who I was called to work with and realized that I didn't have any legs anymore, I quickly realized that 5-mile hikes in the woods with troubled people probably was not going to happen anymore. And for a moment I even questioned whether or not I would be able to use wilderness therapy with this population. But you know, the longer I laid in that hospital bed, the longer I saw the people around me watching soap operas all day long, the more I realized this is the population that needs wilderness therapy the most. Because this is the population that is most separate from the natural environment. You know, in my younger years, I would just point in any one direction and just start walking. And I could just go as far until I got too tired to walk, and I didn't have to worry about curb cuts, or roots, or steps, or walks. Rocks. But today, you know, I take my wheelchair out, and there's all sorts of obstacles everywhere. And I want to go out to these state parks, and they say they're accessible when you get there, and it's like this incline is not ADA, and almost fall out of the wheelchair, or do fall out of the wheelchair. So there's all these obstacles. So what I realized is what's really needed is some way to kind of meet this gap between the natural and the accessible. Because as soon as you start building ramps, it's not really that natural anymore. So I want to bridge that gap. And I want to open a park, a nature center, a community center, a center for growth, where people can experience the outdoors. People of all ages and abilities can experience that growth and healing in a community center. So kind of what I envision is buying like a big chunk of land somewhere within an hour radius of the Atlanta airport and bulldozing it into accessible trails, probably different levels. So one for people in power wheelchairs, one for people that use walkers and crutches, and then one for people that don't have any limitations. And then also have personal trainers, nutritionists, a community garden, yoga classes, adaptive yoga, where people in the community can just drop in at any time or come for individual and group counseling and just experience growth together. And I think the community aspect is so important because I don't want it to be a place for people with disabilities, because then only people with disabilities go there, and I want everyone to be exposed to one another and to our differences, because I think until that happens, we're not going to be a fully integrated society, and there's going to continue to be discrimination against people with disabilities because there's just ignorance, and ignorance breeds discrimination. So this is my kind of 8-year plan. I'm going to be taking next summer after I graduate with my master's degree in social work, and I'm going to be writing my memoir and do a book and speaking toward it, and all the proceeds will go toward this dream of mine. So if my dream resonates with any of you guys, definitely keep in touch. I'll need lots of volunteers. And also, find me on Facebook. I have a public figure profile. It's just Aimee Copeland, A-I-M-E-E. I'm wearing like a peach-colored top in the picture. And there's a message option so you guys can stay in touch with me and stay updated on everything that I'm doing. So that's all I had for today, but I always like to open it up to like a big question and answer at the end, because my life is incredibly extensive. There's a million things that I do, and I know you guys might be interested in asking me questions about how do you drive a car, or, you know, tell me about those things that are on your arms, or whatever. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I'm an open book and I'd love to answer.
I have one question. I'm assuming you have an iPad or something.
Yes, this is my iPad. This is my lifeline.
And your prosthesis are styluses.
Yes, I was actually telling the students earlier, and I was bragging on myself because it was kind of my idea. Because I do use an iPad for everything. I mean, it's all my textbooks. It's where I write all of my papers. It's been really important. And when I first got the iLimbs, they did not work with the touchscreen. And so I would have to take them off every time I used my phone or my iPad, which was about 90% of my life, all the parts where I wasn't sleeping. And so that wasn't very convenient. So I told them, well, you need to make it so these are touchscreen sensitive. So they've added this little dot in that index finger, which actually makes it sensitive to touchscreens, which makes a huge difference, especially because there's an app that goes with them where you can control the hands through the app. you know, most of the users are unilateral amputees, so they have a sound hand to do all that stuff, but hey, bilaterals need love too. So we've got this so we can use the app and wear our arms at the same time, and it's awesome. And I love the iPad. I think it's such an awesome device for so many people with disabilities to be able to do things. So.
Aimee, can you share with them what you were talking to us about while we had dinner about the phantom limb pain?
Yes.
How you dealt with phantom limb pain?
Absolutely. I don't know how much you guys know about phantom limb pain. Most of you OTs probably know about it. Most of the students have probably learned about it in class. But essentially, I still have, brain tissue that's devoted to these limbs that I used to have. So it feels to me like I still have hands and feet and legs. And so the best way I know to describe this feeling is it feels like my hands are sort of curled up almost into fists, and then someone submerged them into concrete that was drying and let it almost completely dry, but not quite. So I can move them a little bit, but then there's pressure that I experience when I try to move them. And so this is very distressing, very painful. And I know many amputees, and I in the beginning was on a plethora of different painkillers to try to control this. Unfortunately, painkillers also make you live in a little bit of a fog. So I would fall asleep in the middle of conversations, not remember things later, and I just didn't like that. So I had to get off of all of them. And so I tried many different ways to try to make these phantom pains stop. And so my first response, if your hands kind of close in a tight position, my instinct was, okay, well, I'll just try really hard to pull them apart. But when I do that, the really counterintuitive thing that happens is they squeeze tighter together. The harder you pull them apart, the harder they squeeze together. And so quite on accident, I discovered one day, I've always been very into mindfulness, meditation, and relaxation. So I was actually just sitting outside of my parents' house one day, and there was this beautiful breeze. It was like a beautiful spring day, and I was just being really aware of this breeze on the ends of my arms, and I was just totally relaxed and feeling very calm. And quite to my surprise, my fingers slowly started to float apart. And I, through that, discovered how I could use relaxation and meditation and just single-pointed awareness in order to relieve those phantom pains. And now I can do it just as I was there closing my eyes, my fingers were floating apart. And so now I can use this modality, especially because it's really crazy. It's like I can almost tell you, in my bones I can feel when it's about to rain. When the air pressure is high, it gets worse. And so now when it gets really bad, I'm able to just sit and relax. And just as soon as I start doing it, they just start floating apart. It's the craziest thing. So I'm really pleased I'm actually going to, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of the Skills for Life conference. It's a conference that's solely for bilateral upper extremity amputees, which is really cool because there's not a ton of us. And so I'm going to be leading a meditation session there and hopefully helping other people find some relief for their phantom pains. I'm also getting t-shirts made when I go that say National Chainsaw Juggling League. I'm passing that out to everybody that comes to my session. That's awesome. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just wondered, you've been so gracious to share that you've had some spiritual transformations. And that you're an advocate. Is there any particular text that helped guide you in mindfulness journey?
Yes. Actually, yes. There's one that really stands out, and that is Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, yeah.
Was very, very, had a huge impact on me. And I'd actually read it years before my injury. And when I woke up in the hospital and learned of what had happened to me, that was what I thought of. I thought about Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp, and there's one part where he talks about his wife and like imagining his wife in his mind. He didn't know if she was alive or dead, but like just the thought of his wife kept him going. And to me, I had my friends, I had my studies, and it just reminded me that as long as I had meaning and as long as I had purpose, that I was the creator of my own reality. And so I read the book again afterwards, shortly after I left rehab, and just bawled throughout the whole thing. And it had a completely, every line was so meaningful afterwards, and it changed my whole perspective. So That's really important. I recommend that book to all of you. It's a very quick and short read. It's actually a 2-part book, and the first part is sort of the novel about his life, and then the second part is all about logotherapy, which is a form of therapy that he created. And if you're not interested in therapy, you could just skip over the whole second part and just read the first part, and you would get everything out of it. So, I very highly recommend that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been listening to what sort of encouraged you and what discouraged you and your wonderful response to the discouraging part. And it's always a challenge, at least it has been for me as an OT, to balance the feeding the soul with the reality checks as best as I know them, so that, you know, I feel like we're always hanging in there somewhere.
Yes.
And I wondered if you have any advice to us on how to deal with that in the most respectful and effective way. Jim, do you understand what I'm?
I do. I think I understand what you mean, because you want to give people hope, but you also want to be realistic, and you want to kind of, it's like managing your idealism and your realism at the same time.
Right, yeah.
It's keeping your feet on the ground while maybe having your head a little bit in the clouds.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely more of a head in the clouds kind of girl.
Yeah.
But this whole experience has made me a lot more realistic and even cynical to an extent. And you know, when I have had some of my clients at Shepherd Center who have been less motivated than others, and I've had people that I speak with, that I mentor, and that are just constantly just feeling sorry for themselves and just constantly complaining. And I personally don't even really like to be around people like that, you know, as friends. I mean, obviously I'm a social worker, so I'm dealing with a lot of complaining people here. But in my personal life, you know, I try to surround myself by people who have more hope and who are willing to try and who are motivated. But for the people that aren't, I think sometimes you have to hit rock bottom. Sometimes you have to go all the way down and hit the very bottom in order to have any kind of motivation at all. There's this great joke that I heard recently. How many social workers does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but it really has to want to change. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about it. If somebody wants something badly enough, then they're going to have to try for it. And for other people who don't want it badly enough, I think sometimes you just have to stand back and wait for them to want it. You know, and it's sort of like in AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous. They say you can't ever really tell an alcoholic like that they're an alcoholic and try to change them until they say I'm an alcoholic and want to change. There's nothing that can help them. And I really think that personal motivation is so important. But what I say to the clients that I work with that aren't motivated is I'm like, you don't have to do any of this stuff. Like, you don't have to learn how to do this stuff. You could probably just lay in bed and, you know, live on Medicare and welfare and never really do anything fun for the rest of your life. Does that sound like something you want to do? The answer is always no. And how I kind of follow up with that is, you know, well, we're here. We have to be here. You have to do rehab in order for your insurance to keep you here. So tell me, what are some useful ways that we can spend your time here? And I find that when I put it that way, and then they come up with the goals, you know, I could tell them, while you're here, we're going to work on your ADLs, and we're going to teach you how to brush your teeth, and we're going to teach you how to put on deodorant, and maybe they don't really care about that stuff. But when I say, you know, what would you find it useful for us to do, or what would you like to do? Well, I mean, if this is just such a waste of time, then how can we make it at least a little bit more fun? And then that's when they express their own goals to me, and they process and articulate their goals, which might be something I never thought of. They might want to learn how to go fishing or how to play poker again, and then having that internal goal, which they came up with, that they're personally motivated for, that, you know, if they've given back that autonomy, that self-determination to decide what they really want. It's not being imposed by the outside, by the quote-unquote expert. They become the expert. I find that is what really brings up the motivation. And sometimes it doesn't improve their attitude anymore. You know, they may have a little bit more motivation and a terrible attitude. And to me, it's just like, well, you're going to have to work with that. You're just going to have to learn on your own that that's not going to work through life. And some people have to learn the really hard way. But sometimes there really is no answer, I think. Sometimes there's really nothing you can do, and you just have to let that person process it. And remember, that's their stuff, and it has nothing to do with you, and it's everything that they're going through, and they just have not accepted this yet, or whatever's going through their head, something is going on there that they just are going to have to process on their own, or with the help of maybe a different therapist, maybe a counselor, getting somebody else involved, and having a more holistic approach that way. Yes.
So I'm curious, when you think back to the time when you were so acutely injured and you started coming out of your medication fog, et cetera, and you realized what had happened, what did you start doing that sort of started you down your path? I mean, obviously your attitude and your spirit was ready and available, but what was it that you started to do that showed you, I'm on my way, I'm handling this, I have a path to take here?
I think it was really moment by moment in the beginning. Because at that point, I was still learning to do all the little things. So I pretty much just became determined to do whatever came in my path, to do my therapy, to be the best at my therapy, to get home and to get independent and to sort of regain that lifestyle that I'd had before. So I mean, at first, it was processing the emotions that had to happen. And so for the first 2 weeks after I'd been weaned off the methadone, actually my occupational therapist just put a box of tissues in the back of my wheelchair. It was just a permanent fixture there, because I would be rolling around Shepherd and I would see something like really sweet and touching on the wall, and I would just break down crying. And so, you know, for that little amount of time, it was like these emotions were going to come out in any way possible. And so I found expressing those, and then using all that energy that I had toward figuring things out. Kind of like I was saying, like having people identify their own goals. What I started doing was identifying what I wanted to do. I wanted to go kayaking. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to get off my butt, get off my back, and stand up. And just being able to stand up after you've not in months is like the most amazing feeling in the world. So just those little things. Learning how to put my hair in a ponytail, just learning how to be in the world. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Just share a person or persons who really made a difference when you were rehabbing and inspired you or kept you going.
There was a couple of quad EMT women that came and visited me, and that was really important for me. One was, her name is Becky Springer. She's actually a mother of like 3 kids, so I'm like, wow, I don't even have to deal with all that. I don't know how you do, but I guess I can do it if you can do it. And she had a huge impact on me. I remember she met me at Shepherd Center, and we went down to the cafeteria together, and she's like got all her little cuffs. She didn't wear any upper arm prostheses. She's amazing with the way she brushed her hair, with the way she ate. And I had gotten a burger that day, and my ex-boyfriend always called me the queen of condiments because I like love ketchup and mustard, and like I like my food to be wet. So it's kind of a weird thing. So I had put all this ketchup and mustard on my burger, and I'm trying to eat it with the ends of my arms, and it's slipping all over the place, and it's slipping out of the bun, and I'm getting really messy. And Becky looked at me and she said, "You just need to stop worrying about being pretty right now. Just get messy." And she had me like covered in mustard and ketchup, and I hate that burger. And so that was really cool of her to show me. And she was just really amazing. And I looked at her and thought that's how I want to be. She was my role model. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys.
Do you have a working title of your memoir?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I was just telling someone the other day, I'm really bad at naming things. I don't have a name for my nonprofit that I want to start. I don't have a name for my book. I hardly knew what to name my dog. So if anybody has ideas on what I could call it, please shoot me something on Facebook. I usually call my speeches like Courage Through Chaos, and I really like the idea of chaos and finding strength through suffering, and sort of like that juxtaposition of how suffering is necessary to grow. So I kind of want to go through down that line, but once again, if anybody has suggestions, I'm
Getting
very
messy.
Getting messy. I like that. I like that. Okay. All right. Thank you. I feel that.
Put me in the acknowledge.
Go ahead. I was just curious about your family. How did they find the strength, and where did they find it?
Well, my family they're very, very strong Christians, and so the church, in a large part, helped them get through it. I mean, it was really hard for my family, especially in the beginning, when a lot was happening and I was out of it and I didn't have to experience all the pain and suffering. They had to watch me go through that when I had tubes coming out of every hole and then some, and my head was swollen to the size of a basketball, and I was just retaining water and all bloated. And so yeah, they went through all of that, but I think their faith is what kept them going. And my dad has some very distinct moments when he, was kind of on the verge and felt that he couldn't be as, waves crashing among the sea, but to have that strong faith and to know what was going to happen. So, and I think that's where I get my own determination, is that was instilled in me as a child.
I have a follow-up to that. As you were getting more independent, did you have a hard time saying, okay, I got it? Or did they give you that freedom?
With my parents?
Yeah.
It took a long time, yeah. Oh my gosh, when I first moved back with them, they wanted me to have a 10 o'clock curfew. I'm 25, you guys! And so, just driving around really scared them. Driving 3.5 hours to Valdosta and staying overnight by myself, that terrified them. But over time, they love to travel. They started going on more vacations. They saw that I was fine being without them for a week. And they love my roommate, who I'm moving in with in Atlanta. And so I think that they have faith in me now. They've seen what I can do. And so they've definitely stepped back a little bit and let me do things on my own. Much because I've been like, yo.
Yeah.
You're so close to family. Would you ever want to start your own family? And do you have any
Yeah, I do. It's like really difficult thinking about being pregnant when you're me, because if I do get to the point where I'm walking and then I have a pregnancy, I probably won't be able to walk. I'll probably be back in the wheelchair. Just like a lot of concerns about my body going through a pregnancy with all my skin grafting. So I've pretty much decided that I'm interested in fostering and adopting children. And you don't even need a husband to do that. Well, actually, I'm dating a really amazing guy. We've been together for like 6 months. We met long after my injury, and he's amazing. And I'm one of those. My last relationship was 6 years, and it ended because of my injury. And so I'm very aware of what can happen and that people change. So I'm taking it slow. I'm not having any fairy tale idealism. Enjoying it while it's here, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much.